Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. So, the Eternal Palace has been out for over a week now. The Mythic difficulty has been released along with the LFR, and I haven't got ahead of the curve yet. Shameful as it is, I have killed 7 out of the 8 bosses, and I haven't actually faced the Azshara heroic version yet, but my guild is planning to have a look at it on Sunday when we do our raids. So today is Thursday, and we will be looking at the first couple of bosses in the Mythic difficulty. I think the first boss is going to be pretty easy, and then it will get a little bit harder, but that's fine, I think we will get to a point where we are comfortable, and we will progress through the Mythic at a steady rate. And what you've got to remember, it's only come out for the last couple of days, and as of this moment, Method are stuck on a Lady Ashe vein, and they've killed her a few times. So obviously we're not the highest rated guild, but we do like to push ourselves as far as we can. So what are we going to do today? Today we are going to look through every single boss in the raid. We're not going to do a complete guide. I don't think that's the point of this video, and I think it would go on for a very, very long time. But what we're going to do today is look at every boss, look at some of the abilities. So the first boss is the Abyssal Commander. This boss splits the raid group up into 2 groups, one being Poison and the other being Frost. And these 2 groups, I have played either side of it. My preference is the Poison, as Frost you have to keep moving. And as a healer, that can be very annoying. But a good tip for you guys, if you are finding that mechanic a little bit difficult, is to just jump. Jump counts as moving. The one good thing about playing a Resto Shaman is I have Spirit Walker's Grace, which allows me to cast while I am moving. So what that means is while I'm jumping about, I can still cast off all the abilities that I normally would. Now obviously this only lasts for about 15 seconds, and I have been frozen quite a few times. I will admit it, sitting there for 7 seconds frozen is not helpful when you're in a raid. This was very, very easy on normal. Yes, it is probably one of the most challenging first bosses that we've seen this expansion, with the Talok and Champions of the Light being pretty easy, and we've been able to clear it pretty fast actually. But with the guild that I have joined for this tier, we cleared this first time on heroic and on normal. So even though it is a little bit more mechanically challenging, it isn't as hard as some of the other bosses. So you have to keep the raid split, making sure that the Frost and the Poison do not touch each other, as that will deal massive damage. We lusted on the start to try and burst her down as fast as possible. Making sure that you stack on certain abilities is really, really important, as it can deal a lot of damage, and it will one-shot you. I've been one-shot numerous of times when I've pugged this on different difficulties, because people do not stack, and even if it's only one person, you can survive it. But if you have nobody stacking on you, you will probably die. And when I say probably, I mean you will die, unless you use something like Bubble or something like that. That probably could save you. I tried to use my Astral Shift. It did not save me. So making sure that you stack on that is really, really important. As I said, we lusted at the start to damage her down as fast as possible, and just making sure that everybody is spread and that you're doing mechanics properly, you will clear this pretty fast. I've really enjoyed this fight, and I like the challenge at the start. It gets you awake and make you ready for the rest of the raid. So next up we have my least favourite boss of the raid, even though it is an interesting one. This is the first underwater raid boss that we've had in World of Warcraft, and it did have, in my opinion, a lot of potential. As a healer, I don't like it. The fact that people don't stand in the pufferfish to get the buff, which makes you heal, can be it can be very annoying. So just to give you a bit of an insight on how this boss works, if you haven't seen it, what happens is as you go underneath the water and get the 100% healing reduction to make sure that you can breathe underneath the water, what you have to do to be healed is there are pufferfish located around the boss's platforms, where if you kill the pufferfish, it will release this green gas, which if you stand in, it will allow you to be healed for the amount that you normally would be. However, this gas doesn't stay there for a long time, and if you don't get the buff from these pufferfish, then you will probably die unless you have defensive cooldowns in time for the next pufferfish to go down. Now, the downside of having this buff is that if you are over open water and not on the platform, you will have a 5-second, and this is in normal, I think it's 5 seconds, in heroic, I think it's 3 seconds. You will be one-shotted by a great big fish that comes and chomps you right up. So moving on to the next platform, you've got to make sure that that buff is not on you. Unfortunately, as you're moving to the next platform, there are jellyfish that will also give you that buff. So if you get it while you are traveling over and bump into one of the jellyfish, you are probably going to get one-shotted along the on the way to the next platform. So as you move on to each platform, as time goes on, each platform becomes a little bit more difficult. So there's gaps in the platforms, which mean you have to make sure you're positioned in a certain way. Make sure that you're not stacked next to anyone, because the boss does an ability called Shock Pulse, which will damage more people if you are stacked. So making sure that you've got at least 5 yards in range is needed. However, this can be very difficult, as movability and space on the platform can be quite small, because of the platforms becoming smaller and smaller as you progress in the race. However, what you've got to remember is you're underneath water. Not only have you got the horizontal space, but what you've got to remember, you've got the vertical space too. So making sure that you use all of the space available as you're underneath water is very important in this boss. Why is it my least favourite? I don't know, maybe because I didn't do the best on it. I really can't. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not sure on what I'm doing wrong, but there is something there which isn't allowing me to heal for the amount that I normally do in raids. However, getting more experience with the different bosses is allowing me to heal more. So after you kill this boss, a seahorse will appear, which will take you to the third boss, which is the Radiance of Azshara. So, the Radiance of Azshara, if you guys have played Legion, is practically the same as the 5-man dungeon, in the Eye of Azshara, the last boss in there. So, within this boss, there is a lot of moving again. I find that there is a lot of moving in this raid. For the 3 bosses that we've seen so far, it's about moving and making sure that you're not standing in the same place for a long time, which for us casters can be a little bit difficult. So in this boss, you are having to dodge tornadoes. You are having to move arcane bombs out of the raid. So what you do with the bombs is you move them to the side of the raid encounter, and a healer will dispel you. So if healers are dispelling instantly, you may be dropping a bomb on everyone. So making sure that you dispel them at the correct time, and having communication on coolouts on "please dispel me now, I'm outside of the raid" can be really important. Or if there isn't any communication and you're pugging it and there isn't a Discord or there isn't any chat going on, you healers have to be very visually aware of what's going on. And unfortunately, while being visually aware and making sure that bombs are out of the way, that can make you forget that you're dodging tornadoes. And I'm telling you now, I'm sure those tornadoes have the hots for me, because they follow me everywhere. Out of the first 3 bosses, I would say that this is the easiest, as it does follow some of the mechanics from the 5-man dungeon, which was quite useful, and it was nice to have a easy-ish boss in the raid. Making sure that you damage down the ads as well is really important. So forget about the boss when the storm kind of comes, and take down that ad, and make sure that you're not leading tornadoes or bombs into the middle of the room again. And it's kind of rinse and repeat until you damage the boss down. And I would say that that's probably one of the simplest bosses in this raid. So this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. We move on to Lady Ashvane. She's been a thorn in our backside for most of the expansion now, and if you play Alliance, then she's even been a thorn for you even more, but she's keep popping up, and she seems to never die. Now, for her loyalty to Queen Azshara, she's ascended into a form which she didn't think was very good, but she wanted power, and Queen Azshara gave it her, transforming her into this beast of a thing, even more of a beast than she already was. She has been one of the most painful things for Method to take down. This was kind of where Method had the wall appear in progressing through this raid. So Lady Ashvane casts very few abilities, actually, fewer than a lot of bosses. However, mechanically and making sure that people aren't stacking and making sure that they're removing the corals is very, very important. If you're not removing the corals, then you may end up near the end of the boss and not having any more space to move around the room, which can be very, very annoying, especially when you're trying to get the bubbles which people have to break down as fast as possible, and making sure that you're spread so you're not having that damage spread across the entire raid as well. So making sure that you're breaking the corals is really, really important. So to break the corals, what you do, you and a partner will have a symbol above your head. It will be coloured. It will either be a red, blue, or a yellowish colour. And what will happen is you will have, after a few seconds, a beam kind of pulsate between both of you. And the easiest way to break the corals is for you and your partner to stand on either side of a coral and allowing that beam to travel between the both of you, going through the coral, and that will destroy it. Now, a really, really good thing to practice if you're progressing on Lady Ashvane is to break multiple corals at once. So the beam will travel through anything. It will travel through 3 corals, it doesn't matter. If you can line up in a position where you are, the beam will travel through 3 corals, you do that. It will clear everything, and if you're making sure that you're clearing all the corals, it will make your life 100% easier. Now, if your partner happens to be a tank, or you're a tank yourself, if you are a tank yourself, then you should allow your partner to take the lead on what corals they're breaking. And if you are the partner of the tank, make sure you know once it's a tank, you are leading that destruction beam through corals. So what we'll have to do is Lady Ashvane will have a shell or a shield that she puts on herself, where you will deal no damage to her. To deal damage to her, you have to break that shell, and she will cast, I think it's about 3 of these shells before she goes into berserk mode, in which you can deal damage to her when those shields come down. It took us a few attempts. We got up to Lady Ashvane on our first night of raiding in the raid altogether. We stopped, and then the next day we had a few pulls, and then we killed her. I think we had time to kind of think about what we were doing, the positioning. A lot of groups that I've been with put her against the edge of the room, allowing you to have a little bit more space, and I found it once we've killed her once, it was easy to kill her again. However, I think when we go into the mythic difficulty, as I've seen from Method over the last couple of days, it will stump us for a very, very long time. So I think this is one which we will have to get a lot of practice on and get our item level and our strength up before we face this somewhat difficult foe. So just over halfway through the raid bosses, we come to Queen Azshara's hatchery, where she creates all of her Naga. In this boss, we face Orgonzola. Again, a difficult boss, which to tanks, he is very, very mean. He hits for a very, very high amount. And what this boss does is he will put fluid on every single, or try to put fluid on every single raid member, which if he casts Arcing Currents, he will deal raid-wide damage. So the key to getting this boss killed is to try and get him to 40% where he does a transition. And what will happen is he will flee to a lower level where you will have to follow him, dodging swirls and jellyfish and everything like that to make sure that you don't get killed instantly. Once you've got him down to 40% and he is down there, it's pretty easy to get him killed. Your fluid will drop. You will have a clean kind of reset on the fluid, so your healers won't have to worry as much. Now, so watching Method on this boss has been interesting. It seems like this boss on the mythic difficulty will be very healer needed, and the healers will be very, very important. That's what I've seen for the last, I think it's 5 hours I've been watching them, 5 or 6 hours I've been watching them trying to defeat this boss today, and they finished it yesterday. So, or they started it yesterday, should I say. It seems like healers are very, very important, so making sure healing cooldowns, they've been using Discipline Priests and Paladins to make sure those single targets are getting healed up as fast as possible, especially with the tanks taking so much damage. Haven't really seen any monks. I've seen a Resto Druid, and unfortunately I haven't seen any Resto Shaman, so my raid leader may ask me to bring one of my other healers to this boss if we get here on Mythic quite fast. But I think, like I said, Lady Ashrain will be a kind of wall for us for a very long time. So I think my main as a shaman will be much more powerful when we get onto Gorgonzola. But a pretty good, pretty fun boss. I really, really enjoy it. So next we move on to the Queen's Court. Azshara's most loyal and powerful subjects try and stop you reaching the next boss. And this seems like a lot of coordination from the entire raid. I think the entire raid has to be on their toes. I think a lot of times bosses kind of make tanks being very, very concentrated and serious. Again, sometimes it's healers like we saw on the last boss, but I think this raid is, or this boss should I say, is a raid group effort as a whole. So Azshara will command you to do certain things like soak orbs, stay away from each other, keep moving, don't move, and if you don't do these, you will die. If you do these, it will deal a lot of damage, but making sure that you're coordinated in such a way that you're healing and you're dealing damage and that the tanks aren't dying can be very difficult if you aren't a group who can communicate very, very well. Now on Heroic, it took us a few attempts to get this down, actually. It was a difficult one for multiple reasons of trying to keep the tank alive where you can't bring the two subjects together. So when there is a massive damage ability coming, one of the enemies casts a bubble, which the entire raid has to get into. However, the tank which is holding the other enemy cannot get into that bubble, which means they are having a lot of damage dealt to them. So saying we have a Death Knight and a Warrior as our two main tanks, as I've seen, and I think that the Warrior, I'm sure it's the Warrior, normally takes the ad out of the bubble. So making sure that you've got healing abilities. It'd be nice to have a Holy Paladin keeping that tank alive during that kind of phase. And I think a lot of people look at Holy Paladins as Mythic Plus healers. However, they can be very, very useful in raids. You've seen, if you've been watching Mythic have been using Holy Paladins quite a lot on a lot of bosses, as their single target healing and the amount of healing they can do is really, really, really high. I think a lot of people look at Holy Paladins and they take away the AoE as well, which isn't true. They can deal massive amounts of AoE healing as well if you know how to play them correctly. But getting back onto the boss, we did wipe a few times, and unfortunately that it was sad to see that, the fact that we kind of ruffle stumped through everything else apart from the last two bosses, and it was a pretty easy boss to get down. We kind of coordinated what we were doing, we got it down. I still need the ring off it. The ring off that on Heroic or Mythic is like a 70% upgrade for me. So if any guildies are watching this and they don't need the ring, then please give it to me, because I need it. So next we reach our next wall boss, as I'm going to call them. This is one which we got stuck on for quite a while, actually. We actually spent an entire raid night on this boss, but we weren't able to kill him. Unfortunately, the last time we raided was Tuesday, and I wasn't able to make it, and the raid got him down, which was unfortunate. But then I joined a group and got him down instantly on the first try. So I'm happy with that. The problem is with this boss is there is a lot of things to dodge, and making sure that your coordination again is done in a way which will allow the raid to stay alive. So dodging things like tentacles, we use a weak aura which tells us just before the tentacle's about to appear, which will shoot across the room and hit anybody who is in the way of it. Now, the tentacle is a pretty easy mechanic, and it's such a shame to see so many people getting hit by it, because it is literally just get out of the way. I would say it's the same kind of mechanic that was on Megatork when he fired his bolt across the raid, and still a lot of people got hit by that. I don't understand why people were getting hit by it. I'll admit I've been hit by it once or twice, but there have been in some groups which it's the same people getting hit by it again and again and again. I think a lot of people want someone to call out where it is, so follow me, it's not there. But I think raiding at this kind of level, especially if you're doing Heroic and Mythic this early, you have to be a raider who is competent of being aware of your surroundings. And I think just knowing what the boss is doing in that sense is something that you need to keep an eye on. So that's one mechanic which can be a pain. So this boss has a couple of phases and realms where you have to damage adds, damage casters, and kind of travel backwards and forwards to different realms where the tanks will stay at the same place. So as all the DPS go down to I think it's the Fear realm to damage the casters, a healer will have to stay up with the tanks to keep them alive, but the rest of the healers will probably jump down with the DPS to get their casters down and make sure that the DPS stay alive at that point. I found as a healer a great way to get very, very high numbers is he will cast a ability which will put a debuff on 3 raid members. Once these are dispelled, as soon as they're dispelled, it will deal a massive amount of damage. And a great way that I've found is on the second time that he puts this debuff on, I drop my Healing Tide totem and I shoot everybody up. I think as they're being dispelled, the problem is a lot of people would say, oh, drop Tremor Totem, but if you're dispelling all 3 of these at the same time, unless your healing is very, very on point and the healers are ready to get everybody shot up, I think it will wipe your raid. I think you have to be very, very careful with those debuffs. So if you're in a group at the moment which has a Discord, make sure that you ask the raid leader or a designated healing kind of leader to tell you, right, I'm dispelling this, so and so's dispelling this, and then normally we'll let the third one drop off by itself. By that time it gives the healers enough time to top everybody up and make sure that everybody's alive. Again, people shouldn't be dying to this ability, but it will be done if you are carelessly dispelling these effects. So damaging him down to a certain point and making sure that he doesn't cast abilities will make sure that you wipe him pretty easily. After you have killed this boss, we move on to the main reason why we are here. So she's brought us through and we've killed 7 bosses before her. But finally, we face a Queen Azshara herself. We're surrounded by Titan objects where we can see chains. And I'm not going to go through the lore part of this because I think a lot of you have already seen the cinematic, whether you've completed this boss on normal, or heroic, or whatever before. So what has happened? What happens in this boss? So we do see mechanics that we saw on Queen's Court, where she gives us the commands. These commands will either be absorb, don't move, move, spread. So it's nice to see that they've taken mechanics from a different boss, which we already know as I would say a minor mechanic, but sometimes it isn't a minor mechanic. When there's other things going on at the same time, you've got to make sure that all mechanics are kind of treated equally. Alongside that, we have a mechanic where we have to keep 3 platforms charged to make sure that she isn't dealing massive amounts of damage as she powers the central rune. So these platforms can be charged by standing on them. However, standing on them will give you a debuff which reduces your max health. So getting more than, I'd say, 5 stacks can start to become very, very dangerous. I've had 8 stacks before and it's reduced my health by, I think it's like 60%. So it can be, it's reduced my max health by 60%. So it can be very, very dangerous. Now this debuff lasts for 2 minutes. So once that debuff is off, you can go and recharge the platforms at the same time. So if I was you, I'd make sure that different groups are charging the platforms at different times and making sure that not everybody has this debuff and that it's kind of it's spread out. The center column you have to actually decharge, which again will give you a debuff, the same debuff, but you have to make sure that doesn't charge up fully, or Lady or Queen Azshara will deal massive amounts of damage. Near the end of the boss, you'll have to use a console, which is an active thing. So make sure that you've assigned at least 1 or 2 people to activate that console, because if you only assign 1 and that person dies and no one knows who's activating the console, make sure that you space out the time of activating this console, because if you activate it too many times at once, the healers won't be able to keep people alive. There'll be 2 Naga which you will have to block line of sight sometimes, and breaking shields with a spear. So again, using that I'd say it's the kind of same mechanic that was used on Lady Ashvane, where you have to make sure that you're near enough so the spear that she throws will break the shield of the adds which you have to kill. But I think once you've learned the basics of Queen Azshara, I think it's just knowing where you're standing and just little things just to make sure that you get that kill. Once you get that kill, you get a cinematic and it's amazing. And that's pretty much it. So what's my opinions on this raid? You know what? I love it. Do I think it's as good as Battle of Dazar'alor? No, I think the Battle of Dazar'alor has been one of the best raids. I think my last favourite raid was the Nighthold. I think that was an amazing raid. Then none of the rest really impressed me in Legion. Team of Sargeras is pretty good. I didn't like Burning Throne. Battle of Dazar'alor was just unbelievable. I really, really enjoyed it. However, the mechanics in this raid have been quite interesting in the sense that, I don't know, I think they're really, really good. It's a little bit more of a challenge. No one's completing it instantly, and there's none of this kind of like the only hard boss really in the raid is Jaina. I think having a nice wall of Lady Ashvane at the start spaces out the raid a little bit more and allows you to progress. It means you're going to have content for a little while longer. So let me know what you guys think about this raid and if it's one of your favourites in this expansion, or let me know what your ranking of this expansion is, whether it's the Battle of Dazar'alor that's your favourite, or Uldir that's your favourite, or that the Eternal Palace is your favourite. I will be coming very soon with a lore video on what actually happens at the very end of the Eternal Palace, and I will be also bringing out a video about preparing for raiding, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in another video.